Welcome to the Times of Israel's daily briefing. Today is Monday, October 27th, day 752 of the war. Amanda Borschel-Dan here with our diplomatic correspondent, Lazar Berman. Hi, Lazar. Thanks for joining me from our Jerusalem office.
Hello, Amanda. Good to be here.
Thanks for coming. And even as the ceasefire holds in Gaza, there are ongoing tensions, both on the ground and in negotiating rooms. Lazar will fill us in. A transnational terror network run by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps Quds Force employs some 11,000 operatives in carrying out covert operations and attacks against Jewish sites. We'll hear more. And Ireland has a new president who just may be more anti-Israel than the previous. All of this and more when we're back. I'm Amanda Borschel-Dan here with our diplomatic correspondent, Lazar Berman. Israel does not know the location of 4 of the remaining 13 bodies of hostages held in Gaza, we learned yesterday. And this morning, Egypt is reportedly bringing 12 additional heavy vehicles into the enclave to clear roads and assist in efforts to locate the bodies. This is happening as media outlets in Gaza report that one person has been killed and several others wounded in a drone strike in an area of the village east of Khan Yunis in the southern Gaza Strip. That area is under IDF control, according to the ceasefire agreement. So, Lazar, the ceasefire does appear to be mostly holding, despite flare-ups here and there. And do you think that some of this is the IDF modulating its responses as the search for the deceased hostages' bodies continues? Or is this just going to be the holding pattern for the near future?
So there's no question that without the concerted U.S. efforts or pressure to make sure that this ceasefire holds, it would have fallen apart. Last week, if you remember, on Sunday, there was that deadly attack in Rafah that left 2 IDF soldiers dead and several more wounded. And Israel wanted to respond in a much more aggressive fashion, and within hours was declaring under U.S. pressure that the ceasefire was back in effect. Israel is also, as you alluded to, has been very frustrated with the rate of return of these slain hostages, of the bodies of slain hostages. Israel says it knows that Hamas could return more bodies. Now, yesterday, someone told me 8 bodies. We had the Khan public broadcaster reporting 9 bodies that Israel knows. The point is the majority of bodies Israel says Hamas can return. It is choosing not to. It is trying to drag this process out. And the measures that Israel wants to take, some of them include blocking all sorts of aid going in, and other measures to pressure Hamas, they have been blocked. America and the senior American officials who were here last week have had a pretty consistent message. They say the next 30 days, and this is what they told Israel, is a crucial period for the ceasefire. Let's just get through this, even though it's imperfect, even though Hamas is obviously violating. And then we can get to the second phase, and that's the kind of the bigger, more permanent things, which are the disarmament of Hamas and the demilitarization of the Gaza Strip. So that's the message. There's not a ton Israel can do because, of course, Netanyahu has really, wed himself to Trump and has decided that he is going to make sure that there's no public disagreement between him and Trump. That has done well for him. Obviously the Iran war in June that saw the U.S. get involved at the end. And of course, this ceasefire that saw the living hostages get out at the very beginning. So there's definitely benefits to Netanyahu's approach, and he's gotten a lot from it. But you're also starting to see how it limits Israel's freedom of action, and which gives some space, at least temporarily, for Hamas to violate the ceasefire and to feel like it has a lot more wiggling room than Israel would like.
Hamas isn't just violating the ceasefire, but also it basically has resumed rulership of the Gaza Strip in the 47% of the strip that it now occupies. And I guess my question is, when we're seeing reports that Hamas agrees that there should be such and such person on the technocratic council to rule the Gaza Strip after they quote unquote step down, it just seems like they're very much clearly key figures and really intent on playing a role in the future as well.
Yes. Now, there are many in Israel who are alarmed by that, and rightly so. I will say that Israel is somewhat to blame because Israel has been extremely reluctant about creating an alternative force and keeps talking about this dream of an international force and then some sort of technocratic government that's neither Palestinian Authority nor Hamas. Israel has, in areas that it controls, supported these anti-Hamas militias. So there's the famous Abu Shabab in eastern Rafah, and there's a militia in Khan Yunis. There's more, and I assume there's some that we haven't heard about yet, that could form the backbone, but Israel has to really, think bigger and not just see them as a local security force, but the future of an anti-Hamas government. So Israel is somewhat to blame for this. The Let's say the US would say that this is just temporary because once we get to phase two, that's when we talk about dismantling Hamas's rule. Right now, phase one is about getting out the bodies and getting some humanitarian or a lot of humanitarian aid in. It's phase two that Israel is not willing to move to yet because it wants to finish getting the hostage bodies out, where we talk about disarming and the future governance. Of course, Hamas, they're not dummies. They understand what the game is here, and they are trying to figure out, how much room they have to actually determine who is ruling the Gaza Strip while not explicitly violating the ceasefire. So they're saying it's not us. No, these aren't Hamas people, but it's clear, at least for now, that they have a very significant say over these emerging technocratic bodies. Now, we don't know what the technocratic body is going to be, how much power it'll have, but these are all things that are in flux and are serious issues. And Israel is somewhat limited right now into how much it can react to it, but it has been expressing red lines to the U.S. Red lines like not allowing Turkish troops into the Gaza Strip and limiting as much as it can Turkish influence, but also limits on what Qatar can do, even though both of those have been very significant, both in recent summits and negotiations and also in the humanitarian effort that's kicking up in the Gaza Strip.
Lazar, I'm going to pick your brain using a different one of your hats. In the past, you were a chaplain at a university. And I think something that has really puzzled many of our listeners is this insistence on regaining the bodies of the deceased hostages. And I wonder if you could just shed a little light on how important this is in terms of Jewish history and culture and the religion.
Yeah, so on the religious side, maybe people remember, in these suicide attacks, you see these very quickly, these usually ultra orthodox men in these kind of plastic suits going around and looking around for things, and what they're doing is looking for every, sorry, it's a bit grisly, but every piece of human body or blood, because in Judaism, every piece of the body has to be quickly given a proper Jewish burial, and that should even be done ideally in the same day as the death occurs. So finding bodies and giving them a proper Jewish burial is absolutely a Jewish imperative. And beyond that, if a lot of these families aren't religious, but of course you want to have some sort of closure, that that your loved one has a grave and it's somewhere you can visit, and they're not left, in some tunnel in the Gaza Strip. So there's multiple reasons for this, and that's why Israel is putting a lot of weight into trying to get them back. The question is, how much of a price do you pay for dead bodies coming back? But it looks like Israel has not made any concessions about anything that could endanger future lives. So there was a massive release of hardened terrorists, but that was for the 20 living hostages. So that's somewhat of a different calculation right there. So there is the effort. You're starting to hear some criticism by some of the families of these slain hostages that Israel should be doing more in terms of military pressure, which is somewhat a flip on what the kind of the large hostage movement has said recently before the deal about what Israel should be doing, that they shouldn't be using military pressure to free the hostages. Well, now you're hearing from the opposition and from some of these families that Israel should be applying more pressure, again, with the U.S. so insistent on making sure that this ceasefire holds and that things move to the second phase of talks. I think it's unlikely that you're going to see any significant increase in military pressure, though I will say President Trump has been, at the beginning, let's say last week, was pretty understanding of Hamas excuses and limitations, saying it takes a while to find these bodies. When there was the attack, he talked about rambunctious Hamas rebels. Now he's starting to give deadlines. He said 48 hours. He's starting to threaten Either the U.S. or Israel will go into Gaza Strip and will take care of Hamas if they don't live up to their agreements. So, we also have to see what happens with these threats from the U.S., but they certainly have been ramped up somewhat.
Let's go to a short break. And we're back. I'm Amanda Borschel-Dan here with our diplomatic correspondent, Lazar Berman. A transnational terror network run by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps Quds Force is behind a string of recent attacks on Jewish states in Western countries, we learned yesterday from the Mossad intelligence agency. So we are hearing about one specific person in particular, Lazar. Who is this person?
Yeah, so this is coming after some plots that they made headlines briefly, but Israel and Mossad has said that they're all connected to the same Iranian network. So in July 2024, you had arrest of 7 people, including 2 Iranians, in Greece, and that's in connection with arson attacks against an Israeli-owned hotel and a Chabad center in downtown Athens. This year in July, there was a Danish police arrested an Iranian who was spying on targets, Jewish and Israeli targets in Berlin for an attack. And that was also connected to Iran. And then there was, if you remember last year, there was 2 attacks in Australia, one in Melbourne, one in Sydney, a Melbourne synagogue and a kosher restaurant in Sydney. And in the wake of that, Australia expelled Iran's ambassador and designated the IRGC as a terror organization. So Israel released yesterday more details about this. It says it's a part of this massive IRGC network run by a pretty senior commander named Sardar Ammar. And its job has been to find people in all these countries and other Western countries to shake the security of Jewish communities, to lay the groundwork for more attacks. So some of these are, ostensibly relatively minor, a couple of bullets at night at a synagogue or a Molotov cocktail at the door of a synagogue. There's obviously been much worse Iranian attacks, but this adds up to a shaking of feeling of security, maybe inspiring more people to carry out more attacks, definitely testing the response of the authorities. So that's what the Mossad released. And of course, part of this is this campaign to focus on Iran's, not only its nuclear and ballistic missile program that has been in headlines in recent months, but also its terror networks. This is something the Europeans obviously are very concerned about as well. They're definitely not happy about Iranian networks carrying out terror attacks in their countries, especially against the Jewish community. So, there's definitely more of these people in this network out there. They tend to use local criminal organizations. So some that ostensibly don't have any connection to Iran, they build connections, pay them, give them all sorts of incentives. And then since they're local and they already have networks, they also are involved in some of the attacks. So this has been a story that's been popping up in headlines for the past couple of years, and I'm sure it's something we'll talk about again.
Let's look to Ireland. And Catherine Connolly, a veteran lawmaker on the far left of the Irish political spectrum, was elected president by a landslide on Saturday. Official results showed strong voter support for Connolly as president, which is a largely ceremonial role in Ireland. Now, for Jews or for Israelis, she has drawn criticism for her views on the Hamas terror group, which she said in September was, quote, part of the fabric of the Palestinian people. She has also criticized Israel for carrying out a genocide in Gaza. So, as I mentioned, Lisa, this is a largely ceremonial role, but do you foresee an even rockier relationship with Israel on the horizon?
Sure. Just because the trend has been so negative, right? You remember that Foreign Minister Gideon Sar closed down Israel's embassy in Ireland and redirected those resources to open an embassy in Moldova, saying, why are we going to invest in a country that has no willingness to listen, to work with us on anything? Even, Connolly's from the far left, but even the center right parties in government have been consistent critics of Israel. So this is just the trend. There's really no, in terms of the political elite, there's really no desire to have positive relations with Israel. It's just this drumbeat of, I would say, obsessive criticism. No willingness to understand the Israeli side, really very little sympathy for what Israel is dealing with. So yes, this is going to get worse. Michael Higgins, in his 14 years as president, obviously a very intensive and critic of Israel. Connolly it's really been a hallmark of her worldview and her time as a politician has been criticism of Israel. I will say it's it's tied up with this general anti-Western outlook, blame NATO as much as Russia for the war in Ukraine. This kind of pacifism, which turns into support for some of the most right-wing figures. So she was on a trip to Assad, Syria. She says it was just to see how EU policies are hurting the Syrian people, but was taken around by some very pro-Assad figures. And of course, saying that Hamas is the legitimate actor within the Palestinian fabric. This is something we don't only see from her. This is kind of a certain flavor of the European far left, where they're so far left that they support some violent movements that could only be described as very, very far right. So this is what we're going to hear from her for the next 7 years at least, and probably this is going to continue to be what we hear from Ireland, and will get in the way of any meaningful improvement in relations. Of course, it's very sad because Ireland and Israel have a lot that makes them natural partners, right? They have that shared history of shrugging off, actually fighting off British colonial rule. Early Zionist leaders and fighters saw the Irish as inspiration. And you had people like Yitzhak Shamir, his nickname was Michael, after Michael Connolly, one of the Irish fighters. So this is really something, is a relationship which should be based on a common history. They're both small countries, tech superpowers with a significant diaspora in the world. There's plenty of positive things that can be done here, but with the Irish insistence on establishing itself as a moral voice in the world by obsessing over the Jewish state, that gets in the way of it. And this will be the situation for the coming years, I'm afraid.
Lazar, thank you so much for all of your insights today.
Thank you, Amanda.
Thanks for listening to the Times of Israel's Daily Briefing. Please check out another episode tomorrow. This episode was produced by the Podwaves. If you have any questions or comments about this or any other installment, please drop us an email to podcast@timesofisrael.com. Until tomorrow, shalom.